Boldwood presents Who Do You Trust? Written by Kirsty Ferguson and read by Bridget Laurie. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. The dark-haired woman sat in the passenger seat of the old station wagon, drumming her fingers along the armrest. Dana was slightly annoyed with her husband Logan for making them late. She glanced in the back seat at their 4-year-old Kelsey, who had fallen asleep, mouth open, summer sunlight streaming in on her pretty face. They were driving out to Dana's parents' property on the other side of town, and they were running behind schedule. Looking out of the window at the bush bordering either side of the road, the sun glinting off the barbed wire fences, Dana was reminded of her idyllic childhood. The rolled-down window allowed the sounds of the bush, trees groaning together, birds cawing overhead, the scent of the earth to permeate the car. Logan drove down the rutted driveway towards the house, pulling up in a cloud of dust. Dana followed him as he took a still-sleeping Kelsey from the back seat and carried her into the spare bedroom. She watched as her husband laid her on the bed gently. Dana then kissed Kelsey's forehead softly and left the door ajar so she could hear if she called out. Logan considered his job done and didn't help Dana unpack the car, leaving her to carry in the camp chair, the salads and Kelsey's bag. All Logan cared about was getting his cooler full of beer into the backyard, where his brother-in-law James was already setting up his chair. He had positioned himself downwind of the barbecue, where Dana's father, Robert, was grilling hamburgers, sausages and onions for lunch, while her mother, Misha, cartoned buttered rolls, putting them in a colourful bowl on the wooden table that sat under the shade of the veranda. "Hi, Mum, Dad," Dana said as she hurried through the front door, giving them a kiss in turn, then hugging her mum awkwardly with one arm, a potato salad wedged under her other arm. "Let me take that for you before you drop it," her mum said, grasping the purple container and putting it on the table. Things were still strained between Dana and her mother, but Dana viewed the barbecue as a chance to repair, to heal the wounds she carried. Logan was supposed to be an emotional support to her today, but it looked as if he was going to be no help as he was already getting drunk with James. "You're late, love. Lunch is nearly ready. Thought you'd gotten lost," her mum said, pointedly looking at the table already covered with food. "Sorry, Mum. Someone just had to finish watching the game." She threw her husband an exasperated look. They'd argued for half an hour before they'd even left the house. She knew Logan loved her. Dana had never doubted his love, not one bit, and he was a great father. But sometimes she wanted to wring his neck. Dana had wanted to leave on time, to arrive before her mum and dad sat down to eat. "It's okay, you're here now, and that's all that matters. Have you said hello to your sister yet?" her mum asked, striving for casual and failing. She looked at Dana through her lowered lashes, not able to meet her daughter's penetrating gaze. Dana knew how hard this was for her mum, knowing the part she had played in their bitter argument, but Dana was ready to try and work through it with her. Brushing away a stray hair that had caught between her glossed lips, she replied, "No, I haven't seen her. Must have missed her when I was coming in." That was a lie. Dana had seen her younger sister, Alicia, but had ducked out of the back door before Alicia had seen her. She was delaying their meeting as long as she could because the last time they had seen each other, 3 months ago, Alicia had said some very unkind words to her. It had ended in a full-blown fight where Alicia had unleashed years of pent-up resentment on her. Dana had had no idea her sister felt that way and was still hurt. But they were both here today because their parents had asked them to be. Mum and Dad were trying to stage an intervention on neutral territory to make the sisters bury the hatchet. Dana could appreciate that having their daughters fighting was hard on them, but they weren't exactly blameless in this either. But Dana knew that the time had come to mend fences. The two sisters had never been very close. Dana had the impression that Alicia was a deeply unhappy woman, stuck in a life she didn't want. She believed that was why Alicia's emotional outburst had been so aggressive towards Dana that day. In an attempt to distract herself, Dana looked towards her husband, in his element, acting as though he hadn't seen James for a whole year instead of several months. They were unlikely friends from the outside. James was a lawyer and Logan a plumber. But it worked, somehow. Their loud laughter carried across the yard, reaching his still annoyed wife. Dana's thoughts were interrupted by the back door slamming. She turned slowly and saw Alicia frozen 2 steps behind her. "Hey, Dana," Alicia said quietly, both of them aware that every eye was upon them. Dana felt the hush of the afternoon, the pressure to do something other than stare silently at her sister. "Hi," she eventually settled on, non-committal yet still polite. No one could accuse her of being rude. Alicia assessed her reply, small frown lines appearing between her light brown eyes. She seemed almost defeated, her shoulders slumped, eyes pleading with her sister. Dana didn't know what to say next, and without warning, Alicia stepped forward and folded her older sister into her arms. Dana stood stiff for a long moment, wanting to punish Alicia for her hurtful behaviour, before eventually putting her arms around Alicia and hugging her back. After what Dana considered an appropriate amount of time, she stepped back, severed the connection, straightening her top. Dana caught her mother's eye. Her mother smiled at her and mouthed, "Thank you." Of course, it wasn't as easy as that. They weren't just going to hug it out and all would be forgotten. No, those devastating words would always crowd out the space between them, always be remembered, but for their parents' sake, Dana would let it go, for now. Yet, she knew she would never forgive Alicia. "So, how have you been?" Alicia asked Dana in a stilted and formal voice. Dana replied, "I'm okay. We're okay, thanks." Speaking to Alicia was much harder than she'd thought it would be. How were they supposed to just go back to what they were before? There had been so much said and so much more left unsaid. None of them could retrieve the words that had been hurled through the air that day 3 months ago. They would have to find a way to move forward from here on. Dana was at least willing to try to move past the ugliness. "That's good," replied Alicia, kicking the ground with her left toe, her brown hair sweeping across her face as she ducked her head down, unable to meet her sister's gaze. There was an uncomfortable silence, which Dana eventually broke by saying, "Well, I'd better go see if Dad needs any help." "Give her time," she heard her mum say to Alicia quietly as she walked away. Time? Was there ever enough of it? Dana took a deep, steadying breath and was heading over towards her dad when she was called over to where Logan sat on his chair. "What do you want, Logan?" she asked, a little irritated. He could have at least offered to help her bring in their things from the car, or asked her dad if he needed a hand grilling. "Another beer would be nice," he said, smiling and shaking his empty beer can at her. James just laughed. Dana silenced James with a glare. And one for James too? Logan said, turning to grin at his brother-in-law, who looked at Dana sheepishly before his gaze slid away from her frustrated expression. Wife glared at husband, a silent battle of wills raging between them. Come on, babe. I'm thirsty, and I love you. The two had no connection to each other whatsoever, but when he held out his hands, she came within range of him and he rubbed his thumb over her fingers. They both knew no matter how he behaved, she was still under his spell, as she had always been. Nodding, she walked over to the cooler, which, when she opened it, had 5 or 6 cans of beer fewer already. Clearly, Logan was settling in for a big session with James. Her dad didn't drink, so he wouldn't be joining in. She looked over at her father, tall with grey threaded through his brown hair, tending the grill. Dana sighed and picked up 2 cans, one in each hand, and walked slowly back to the men, who reached out greedily, popping the tops and taking a gulp each. Logan sighed with contentment, dropping his empty can on the ground by his chair, where there was a pile gathering already. Dana was glad someone was content. She was 32 weeks pregnant and really should have been resting up, but here she was, running after Logan. She loved him deeply, but sometimes she felt as if he were just another child for her to mother. Turning, she locked eyes with her sister, who had come back outside and given her a hesitant smile, which Dana returned. Yes, it was time to mend fences. Kelsey appeared at the back door, rubbing sleep from her brown eyes. "Kels!" Logan boomed, making the little girl jump in fright. "Come give Daddy a hug." He was slurring his words slightly and talking way too loudly, laughing at nothing, a sound that carried across the grass and made Dana wince with embarrassment. Sober Logan was considerate, loving and helpful, but when he drank like this, he was basically useless to her. More than useless, he was a burden, one she didn't need right now. Kelsey looked at her dad, then at Dana, and chose to run to her mother rather than her father. Watching him take a long pull on his beer, Dana worried that Logan's drinking was getting out of control. He was a manual labourer, a plumber by trade, and she understood that part of that job was socialising with the boys after work. But a couple of drinks at the pub often turned into a few more, and then Dana was called to come and pick him up as he was too drunk to drive. She resented being a taxi service at 2 a.m, rousing Kelsey from her bed, but it was better than him driving home drunk and killing someone or himself. At least he was a jovial drunk. He put wet kisses on her face that smelt of beer and grabbed her bum, hoping to get lucky. She had to admit that sometimes it worked. Dana could see her mother waving her over to the table she was setting. She walked slowly over to her, Kelsey at her side, tugging on her clothes tearfully. The little girl was getting too big to carry, and her weight pushed against the baby bump uncomfortably, but she was usually clingy when she first woke up. Dana's ankles were killing her, threatening to buckle with each step as she carried Kelsey to the table. Her back felt as if it were broken in two and sewn back together the wrong way round. This pregnancy was proving more difficult than her first, and she couldn't wait to welcome their little one into the world. Kelsey hadn't wanted a brother or sister at first, and Dana guessed she might be feeling displaced, so she was doing everything she could to reassure her that the baby would be loved equal to her. Popping Kelsey onto one of the wooden bench seats, Dana asked, "You okay, Mum?" Misha had her beautiful brown hair caught up in a large clip today. She was, as always, made up and beautifully dressed, even for a barbecue in their backyard. Dana looked down at herself, her flowing dress reaching the ground, the most comfortable one she owned. She was a pretty woman, holding her own as she aged. Long, glossy black hair, brown eyes and a slim figure. Well, usually, when she wasn't close to giving birth. Dana's figure had bounced back after Kelsey was born, and so she hoped it would be the case with this baby. They hadn't found out which sex it was, although Dana was secretly hoping for another little girl, while Logan was leaning towards a boy. When they found out they were pregnant again, they were ecstatic. Dana wanted to emulate the childhood she'd had with her parents and sister, and Logan had had a shitty childhood. His father ran out when he was young and his mother couldn't cope, so Logan wanted to break the cycle and give his child the stable home life he never had. One evening, Dana had been at her parents' house and having a heart-to-heart with Alicia about family life. Her sister and James had chosen not to have kids, as both of them had very lucrative professional careers that neither of them wanted to give up for a baby. Or so Dana had thought. But while drunk, Alicia had confided to Dana that she was very jealous of her. When Dana had asked why, Alicia had inclined her head and said, "Because you have everything, and I feel that I have nothing, just my job and a disinterested husband." Disinterested? How do you mean? Alicia had sighed. "We haven't had sex in over a year, and I think he's having an affair with his secretary. How cliched can you get?" Alicia's laughter had been brittle and bitter. It was the most Alicia had said about her marriage in years. Dana guessed she was lucky. She had a husband who loved her and who provided well for his family, and then there was Kelsey, the light of her heart. She felt badly for her sister, and when she'd tried to broach the subject a couple of weeks later, Alicia had brushed it off, saying she didn't want to talk about it anymore. Dana hadn't pushed, but had looked at James differently after that. Was he really cheating on Alicia, and if so, what was she going to do about it? Dana wondered what she would do if her husband ever cheated on her, but she couldn't imagine a scenario where that would happen. Dana looked over at her beautiful little girl as she sat at the table next to her nan. Kelsey was quiet, munching on a bread roll, her nan fussing over her, putting a plate in front of her to catch the crumbs and a napkin over her lap so she didn't ruin her pretty party dress. "Mum, I just have to make a quick call to Pippa. Back in a sec. Can you please watch, Kelsey?" "Of course, love." Dana moved to the other end of the veranda, out of earshot, and rang her best friend. "It's not as bad as I thought," Dana said when Pippa asked how it was all going. "We haven't spoken about it, and Mum is trying hard to keep the whole day upbeat. Dad has his head in the barbecue, and Alicia said hi to me, gave me a hug and everything. It was awkward, but at least she's trying." "And Logan? Is he supporting you?" Pippa asked, knowing how he could get when he was drunk. "Not really. He's drinking with James, seems to be ignoring everything else as usual." She looked over at her husband, connecting with his hazel eyes before turning her back on him. "You know how he gets when they're together." "Yeah, I remember," said Pippa. She was part of the family and had spent many afternoons out at Dana's parents' house eating and drinking with them. "Mommy!" yelled Kelsey. Dana could hear tears in her voice. "Shit, I've got to go. Talk later." She disconnected the call. "What is it, sweetheart?" she asked, walking back towards the table. "Where's Boo-Boo?" Shit, the damn bear. They must have left it in the car. She had asked Logan to pack it. It was the one thing she'd asked of him. I don't know, love. Are you sure it's not in the spare room? Maybe he dropped on the floor, Dana asked, worried that Logan had indeed forgotten it, and it wasn't just discarded in the car somewhere. Kelsey shook her head, little arms crossed, a tearful look on her face. How about I check the car? Dana suggested. All right, Mummy, please find him, Kelsey said in that sweet yet insistent voice, the promise of a tantrum in her tone. Dana knew if they didn't find him, Kelsey wouldn't settle and would cry and sulk the whole time, becoming more and more upset. Dana grabbed the keys from her bag and went through the house, unlocking the car as she went out of the front door. She checked the boot first, as that was where all the stuff had been stored. Then the back seat, hoping that Kelsey had dropped the bear on the floor. He wasn't there either. With a sinking heart, she checked the front seat. No boo-boo. The most important thing after Kelsey was that damn bear, and they'd left him at home. How would she tell her daughter they'd forgotten him? Someone, meaning her, would just have to drive home, find him, and bring him back to her. Dana trudged back into the house slowly, not wanting to meet the hope-filled eyes of her daughter. She couldn't believe the stupidity of her husband, allowing the one thing that calmed their daughter to be left at home. Kelsey was sitting with her nan on the very edge of the bench seat, legs dangling, unable to touch the ground yet. Mummy, did you find him? I'm sorry, baby. He must have been left at home by accident. Chapter 2. The bear had belonged to Kelsey since birth, a present from her doting Nan and Pop, and now all Kelsey wanted was Boo Boo. If she didn't get what she wanted, her bottom lip would quiver and her eyes would water before she launched into heart-wrenching cries and ear-piercing screams. Kelsey was crying up a storm, and it didn't look as if she was going to stop any time soon. When Kelsey cried, everyone knew about it. Logan, you forgot to pack Boo Boo, Dana snapped at her husband as she changed course, walking over to where he sat. That was your only job. Dana was pissed off, and Kelsey was working herself up into a fury. Not a good start to the afternoon. It was going to be stressful enough without this on top of it. It made Dana weary just thinking about what was to come. Logan burped loudly in response, scoring him a fist bump from James, who sat beside him in a matching sky-blue camping chair. Logan looked up at the squall coming from his daughter, but stayed sitting in his chair, content in the knowledge that his capable wife would handle it. Darling, can you have one of Nan's toys for today? Boo Boo will be waiting for you when you get home. She tried to placate her daughter, but she was having none of it. I want Boo Boo. Dana pulled Kelsey close to her, smoothing down her hair, yet the little girl continued to wail, and Dana looked at her mother over the top of Kelsey's head. Alicia came out of the house carrying a Bavarian cheesecake. What's all the racket, young lady? She asked, trying to inject cheerfulness into her voice. We forgot to pack Boo Boo. I'm going to have to drive home and grab him now, Dana said, disentangling herself from Kelsey's strangle hug. Honey, I'll be back soon. I'll bring Boo Boo with me, okay? Kelsey pouted for a moment longer, then smiled. For Dana to see her daughter smile at her like that meant everything. How about I watch her while you're gone? Alicia offered, meeting her eyes. Dana hesitated. She was torn. On one hand, Alicia was a responsible adult, not like her inebriated husband. But on the other, They still weren't on the best of terms. Could she trust her? Dana looked over at Logan, who was on his 6th or 7th beer, she had lost count, then back at her sister. Alicia loved Kelsey. She would look after her. Besides, her mother and father would be there too, and home wasn't far away. Surely Alicia could handle Kelsey for half an hour or so. The sooner Dana went home and brought back the bear, the better. Dana, Logan and Kelsey lived in a small cottage in town, which would be too small when the baby was older. Dana had already begun boxing up some stuff to go to charity for when they eventually moved house. Their current place was quaint, a real fixer-upper. It had old patterned lino flooring in the kitchen, threadbare carpet in the lounge, and was stuffed with furniture, pieces Dana had collected over the years. None of it matched, but somehow it worked. "Okay," Dana said hesitantly. "Thanks for that." Alicia was fiddling with the salad bowls, rearranging them. "Just keep an eye on her," Dana said, worry in her voice. "I will," Alicia said quietly. "Logan!" Dana shouted, walking across the grass to where he sat surrounded by crushed empty cans. "I have to go back home. Kelsey is upset because you forgot Boo-Boo," she told him, reiterating that he was the one who forgot the bear. Logan was looking at James as if to say, "Crazy wife?" But she was having none of it. She didn't care if she embarrassed him in front of his friend. "You need to keep an eye on her and Alicia. You too, James. Kelsey's an escape artist and she'll run off. Logan?" She snapped her fingers in front of his unfocused eyes. God, how much had he had to drink? "Watch your daughter," she said, before angrily striding off as fast as her body would allow her to move. Grabbing her handbag, the heavily pregnant woman walked through the front door, passing her dad's old dog Max, who lifted his head as she went by. Dana slid awkwardly behind the wheel of the car, stuffing her stomach into position so she could drive. She would have to give up driving shortly, as she was already having trouble. Kelsey only went to nursery once a week, and Pippa had offered to drive her until after the baby was born. Dana had a few loose ends to tie up before the baby arrived. The cot had been set up in their bedroom, as Kelsey had the other room, and there was no way a cot was fitting in amongst the toys, doll's house, bed and dresser, but she still didn't have bottles, nappies, the little things. Dana sat in the car for a moment, enjoying the complete silence. She couldn't even hear the birds singing outside as she cranked up the air conditioner to full, the cool air blasting her hot face. She was covered in a light sweat just from walking around in the heat. Dana put the automatic car into gear and reversed out of the marked parking spot. She was always careful when driving, especially with Kelsey in the car, and since she had got pregnant, she'd become even more cautious, worried about both her children. She touched the accelerator a bit too hard, then felt the car shake and shudder as it moved backwards. It felt as if she'd hit one of her father's damn rocks. A horrible thought flew into her mind. What if she'd run over Max? Her dad would never forgive her. She put the car into park and got out to see what she'd hit. Pushing the door open with her swollen foot, Dana heaved herself from the car and walked around the side, bending down as much as she could to check if there was anything under there. But she saw nothing. Hand on the body of the car, steadying herself, hoping she didn't see the dog, she moved towards the back of the car, out of breath just from this small act of walking and bending. She bent forward, bracing herself with her hands on her knees, until she saw it. Yes, she definitely hit something. Groaning and holding her stomach, she bent, further down. Suddenly, she began to scream, so loudly that the birds in the trees above flew from where they were perched high in the branches. Still screaming, Dana put her hands on the boot of the car and started to push the heavy old station wagon, but it wouldn't budge. Her stomach pulled and cramped, hurting her, but still she struggled, her breath coming out in short pants. Dana dropped to her knees, pebbles digging into her tender flesh, and reached for Kelsey's arm, pulling hard, not caring if she pulled it out of the socket as long as she could get her out from under the car. She screamed over and over, her voice cutting through the silent afternoon. Finally, her family heard her cries. Her dad was the first one out at the front, crashing straight through the fly-wire door. "Dana, what's wrong?" he asked, terrified. "Is it the baby? What are you doing on the ground? Get up, that's no place for a pregnant woman." "Kelsey's under there! Help me!" she shrieked as the others ran out of the house, joining the group that stood watching her, unable to comprehend what was happening. Her father bent down, then stood back up. All colour had drained from his face. "Sweet Jesus, call an ambulance." When no one moved, he yelled, "Call a fucking ambulance!" He dropped to his knees, then his stomach, sliding under the car, something that Dana couldn't do. She cried as she watched him assess the situation, his years of paramedic training kicking in. He checked Kelsey's pulse, then wriggled back out from under the car. He squatted beside Dana. "Sweetheart," he said quietly. "She's gone. I'm so sorry." He put his hand on his daughter's arm to comfort her, but she shook it off. "No!" she screamed. "Help me!" She clambered to her feet awkwardly and began trying to push the car again. "Help me!" she yelled to her shocked family. "Fucking help me!" Her father put a hand on her arm again. "She's gone, Dana. She's gone." He began to cry, gut-wrenching cries that scared her. Her father didn't cry. There was silence from her family. Even Logan stood there, his face slack with shock, uncomprehending. Dana looked at her father's face with all her heart, not wanting it to be true, but deep down inside knowing it was. "Daddy," she cried, before falling into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She could hear the sounds around her, the buzzing after the complete silence. She wished she couldn't. She wished she could lie down with Kelsey and never wake up again. "Oh my God," cried her sister finally, clinging to James for support. He smoothed down her hair and said soothing words to her. In that moment, Dana hated her. Why was she crying? It wasn't her baby stuck under the car, crumpled like a discarded rag doll. She turned and locked eyes with Logan, who for a moment stood rooted to the spot before being nudged forward by James. She could tell from his face that his beer buzz was completely gone as he looked at the car, then stared at his pregnant wife. He took 2 steps forward, reached out and caught her just as she collapsed into his waiting arms. Dana was lost in a world of memories. She and Kelsey were having a tea party just after she found out that she was pregnant. Dana was squashed into the small wooden chair so she could drink imaginary tea and eat imaginary fairy cakes. She was wearing a pair of glittery pink fairy wings, as was Kelsey, and they were having a wonderful time. "So, Kels, how do you feel about having a baby brother or sister?" "What for?" her daughter asked in her sweet voice. "Does that mean you don't want one?" I love you, Mummy, Kelsey said, pouring a cup of imaginary tea for Dana and herself. I love you too, honey, but I have to tell you something. You are getting a baby brother or sister. Mummy and Daddy are having another baby. Dana waited for her delighted reaction, but instead Kelsey replied, I'll hate it. Kelsey, she said, as her little girl jumped up from the table and shot out of the door, crying. I'll hate it. Rising to her feet, Dana walked down the hallway, peering through doors, trying to find her. It took a while, but eventually she found the little girl hiding under her parents' bed. Dana bent down, then got onto her knees. Honey, why are you so upset? This is a good thing. You'll have someone to play with. I just want to play with you, Kelsey said, her eyes round and brimming with tears. Come on, crawl out from under there. She did, little bits of fluff clinging to her glittering wings. There will be some changes, but I think you're old enough to handle them. You're a big girl now, and I'm going to need help from you, okay? And besides, I'll always have time to play with you. Dana was worried now, but she had a while to work on Kels and prepare her for the arrival of the baby. Dana remembered that a week after that conversation she had bought Kelsey a baby doll that cried, needed to be fed and have her nappies changed. Dana thought it would help Kelsey prepare for what was coming. But Kelsey had left the doll in the corner and piled other toys on top of it so she didn't have to see it. Dana kept pulling it out and placing it on her bed, and Kelsey kept hiding it again. One day, when Dana had found the doll, its arms had been ripped off. When she'd shown Logan, he just laughed. Jesus, Logan, take this seriously. Look, the arms have been ripped off. Aren't you worried about this at all? Kelsey refuses to acknowledge the fact that we're having a baby and won't listen to me when I try to talk to her about it. She even ignores my growing stomach. She treats me like I've got the plague or something. Logan laughed again. This is so not funny. What happens when the baby comes and, God forbid, she hurts it? Oh, so now she's a psychopath who hurts babies. Logan's eyes had crinkled as he smiled, teasing her. Logan, be serious. Maybe you could try talking to her, properly, without me being around to cloud the issue. Fine. Dana stayed in the bedroom while he stomped down the hallway. Kelsey? She heard him call. Where are you, pumpkin? He was gone for nearly 45 minutes, and when he came back he looked less cheerful. Well? She asked. What did she say? She feels like she's not going to be loved anymore by you. What? Obviously, the way you've explained the baby coming home spooked her into thinking that you'd only love the baby. She feels that you'll spend all your time with him or her and won't have time for tea parties and fairy wings. I did my part. It's up to you to convince her now. Well, did you let her know that that isn't the case at all? I told her she could always come to me if she was worried or unhappy about anything. Gee, thanks. Make me look like the shitty parent and you the hero. Fuck, Dana, what do you want me to say? I did what you asked. I tried to make her feel better about the baby being born and I'm still copping flack. You're right. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter which one of us she speaks to as long as she's got someone. Dana walked over, running her hands through Logan's hair, tilting his head down so she could reach his lips. I love you, she whispered. You too. It had taken another 3 months of cold shoulders, lost hugs, and I love yous before Kelsey started coming around. One day it was as if she had just resigned herself to the fact of having a sibling and broken the standoff when she hugged her mum and said, "The baby can come live with us now, Mummy." Dana was so relieved she cried. "Kelsey, I love you, and I'll never stop loving you, no matter what, okay?" Chapter 3. Dana woke slowly, the sights and sounds coming into focus bit by bit. Her head ached as if she'd had the mother of all hangovers, but of course she hadn't been drinking. She felt the baby kicking behind the skin of her stomach, a constant pummeling, as if trying to enter the world weeks too early. Something was wrong. She could feel it. Behind closed eyelids she saw the flashing blue and red lights, the strobes of colour making her eyes hurt. With her eyes still closed, she reached out a hand to feel where she was, and, rather than in a comfortable bed where she was lying, was hard, unyielding. She was on the ground, but not yet ready to face the world. "Dana, open your eyes, love," her mother whispered urgently. Dana could hear screaming. Someone, a woman, was screaming. Why? She recognized her sister's voice. Why was Alicia screaming? Had something happened to her? Was she okay? She felt the hand touching hers shift, replaced by a strong, firm one that gripped her almost painfully. She wanted to say stop, but her tongue was stuck to the roof of her mouth, a lump in her throat, blocking any noise from passing her lips into the warm air. The breeze washed across her face, moving her long black hair over her cheek. Just as fast as it settled, it was brushed away by a loving hand. She felt deep inside that she didn't want to know what was going on, and took these last few moments to stay in the nothingness, where she knew no one and nothing could hurt her. She parted her eyes a crack, the light blinding, the red and blue colours blurry, but she recognized that they were from an emergency vehicle. Was someone hurt? She tried to remember, but it was as if her mind had been wiped clean of any memories. "That's it, sweetheart. Try to open your eyes." It was her husband speaking. He was tender, loving, and not at all slurring his words. Was it the next day? Had she been asleep for that long? Her eyes felt sewn together, as if she were trying to stretch the stitches that held them fast. She swallowed the lump in her throat and whispered, "Logan?" with a voice that was hoarse, her throat sore. "Oh, thank God. I thought... He couldn't finish his sentence, and that frightened her. She had never heard him at a loss for words before. But here he was, bent over her, unable to talk. Dana forced her eyes open wider, the sunlight stinging them. She was indeed on the ground, Logan beside her, grasping her shoulder. She looked up at him. He was crying, quietly, his eyes red raw, his face pale underneath his tan. He looked despondent, heartbroken. "What is it, Logan? What happened?" Dana asked. She cleared her throat, but the pain remained. Why was it hurting? Logan helped her into a sitting position, and she looked around her hesitantly. She was at the side of her parents' house, a fence and a gate sectioning off the backyard from the front yard. Something tugged at her memory. She looked at the faces of the people standing around her. Without exception, all of them were crying. What had happened? "What is it?" she asked again. "Tell me." "They said we should wait," her mother whispered, as if afraid to break some spell. "Who is they? What are you waiting for?" Dana felt weak as a kitten, unable to hold herself up without Logan's support. Why were her family acting so strangely? Family. Kelsey. Dana scanned their faces, looking for one in particular, one absent from the group. She tried to remember what had happened, but failed. "Where's Kelsey?" she asked, the seeds of fear beginning to grow. They all stilled, as if made of stone. No one spoke. No one met her eyes or answered her question. "Is she asleep again?" "No, Dana, she..." Logan couldn't finish his sentence. He tried again as she looked up at him, wanting the truth, desperate for it. "She's gone, honey," he eventually whispered, tears pouring down his face, his hand swiping across his cheeks to dry the tears. "Gone where?" She couldn't understand what he meant. Someone had taken her somewhere? "Dana, the car..." It came back to her in flashes. The bear, Logan drunk, Alicia, Kelsey, reversing out of the drive, hitting something. "Oh, God, no!" Dana staggered to her feet much quicker than a pregnant woman should be able to, flinging off her husband's hand as he tried to grab her. Her family stood in shock. No one thought to catch her. She burst through the side gate, running as fast as she could, holding onto her stomach with both hands, stumbling but managing to stay upright somehow. Her car, halfway out of the drive, was stationary, no longer idling. She could see the flashing lights clearly now. They belonged to an ambulance. The back end of her car was covered in a black tarp, pegged to the ground. Logan, running up behind her, grabbed her arm, trying to pull her backwards, away from the car, but he was no match for her as she took a step forward. "What's underneath the tarp, Logan?" she demanded as she turned to face him, the tears already coursing down her face. She knew. "Dana, what's underneath the tarp? Say it!" she screamed. He jumped a little at the sudden noise as the paramedics looked over at her. "You know what's under the tarp," he said softly, trying to take her hand. She screamed, the sound tearing itself from her raw throat, bursting into the air with the force of 100 birds flapping their wings in unison. She ran forward. A paramedic tried to restrain her, but she pulled free of him and dropped to her knees, crawling under the tarp, flattening her stomach as much as she could, her knees resting painfully on the ground, but she barely noticed. She craned her neck to see her, reaching out her hand to find a smaller version of herself lying still on the ground. So still. Kelsey was never still. Her daughter. Could this be happening? Was this real? She must be stuck in a nightmare, but even as she bit into the flesh of her own lip to wake herself up, she knew it was real. She began to scream Kelsey's name until her voice broke, just like her heart. Eventually they came for her, Logan and her father. The tarp was pulled back to allow them to pick her up from the dirt. "Leave me alone," she whispered furiously, wanting nothing more than to lie beside her little girl, to hold her hand in hers. But they persisted, almost dragging her back inside the house and pushing her unyielding body onto the couch. Her eyes glazed over, and she started to zone out. Her mother asked her if she wanted a cup of tea. What a ridiculous fucking question. One she couldn't and wouldn't answer, so her mother wandered away. She heard a truck coming down the driveway and she stood up, crossing the room to the window. Logan wasn't quick enough to stop her from looking. It was a crane truck. And then it hit her. The truck was coming to raise her car so they could retrieve her daughter's lifeless and crushed body from beneath the wheel. Her car. She did this. She killed her little girl. The sadness kept on coming. She couldn't catch her breath and began to gasp for air that wouldn't come. She clawed at her throat, leaving deep grooves in her skin, sure that she was choking to death. Would it really be so bad to die? She'd be with Kelsey again. The baby inside her kicked, a reminder that he or she still needed her to live. Logan grabbed Dana's hands and pulled them from her throat. His voice sounded far away, as if he were talking through a windstorm, the words torn from his mouth and thrown away like leaves in the summer breeze. "Panic attack," she saw him mouth. Panic attacks passed. Grief never did. Grief would be her lifelong companion from now until she died. She heard the car being lifted, metal creaking. It sounded like tortured thunder to her ears. She couldn't watch as they removed the tarp. She did not want her final view of her daughter to be that. She would remember her with fairy wings, pouring her a cup of imaginary tea. She half smiled at the memory from her dream, before allowing herself to be guided back to the couch where her mum made her a cup of tea, putting it on the coffee table in front of her. Dana heard the truck reversing, and she knew that her car was being hauled away. She didn't know what they'd do with it, but she knew she never wanted to see it again. She hoped they crushed it and turned it into a cube where all her misery could reside. Dana needed to go home. There was nothing for her here anymore. She just wanted to sit, alone in Kelsey's bedroom surrounded by her things, and cry. Her shell collection, picked from various beaches where they had camped over the years. Her favourite doll, Emma. Her pink unicorn that her nan had given her 3 months ago, one for which she still hadn't settled upon a name, so it was just Pinky. Now, it would never be named. And, of course, Boo Boo. "Take me home, Logan," Dana murmured, standing up so quickly that her head spun. He stood too, and she leaned on him for support. "I'll drive you home soon," her father announced, and for a moment she couldn't think of why he would be driving them home at all. Then she remembered. Would it be like this forever? A moment of forgetting, only to be slammed with the truth? It probably would be, and she deserved it. "Let's go, Dad." He looked pained. "What is it?" she asked wearily, unable to take much more. "It's just Kelsey. She's still there, love. They haven't finished yet." He looked distraught at having to say the words out loud, his figure hunched, his complexion grey, seemingly years older. Oh. She didn't know what else to say. They were all looking at her as if she would break down, but she knew she couldn't, not again, not until she was home and alone, surrounded by the shells, the doll, the unicorn, Boo Boo. Dana sat back down, her head held in her hands, elbows resting on her knees. Boo Boo. This all started because of that damn bear. But she couldn't think about that now, or she might start screaming again and not stop this time. Dana lay down on the couch, her head in Logan's lap. Finally, her husband said, "Let's get you home," sitting her up and guiding her by the shoulders as he steered her towards the front door. By the time she stepped out onto the veranda, the emergency services were gone. The truck was gone, and her daughter was gone. Time seemed to have both stood still and sped up. Her mother, Alicia, and James had come out to see them off. They murmured their goodbyes, kissing her on the cheek, gave her gentle hugs as if she would snap under too much pressure. Her dad slid behind the wheel of the car and Logan folded her into the back seat, buckling her seatbelt up for her. She grabbed his hand, stopping him from leaving and looking up at him desperately. The distraught mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I know," he said. "I know, sweetheart." He sighed, closing the door. Chapter 4. Logan opened the door of their house and ushered her inside. Her dad held up a hand in farewell, a grim set to his lips as he drove away. The house was quiet, too quiet. It all looked different now. It seemed tiny, suffocating. Her furniture, the eclectic style that she had cultivated, annoying rather than pleasingly quirky. Suddenly she needed everything to match, order in her now chaotic world. Logan helped her to the kitchen table and she sat automatically. He left her alone and she played with the salt and pepper shakers, smashing them into one another over and over. They were shaped like love hearts. Smash, smash, smash. The salt and pepper shakers broke, white grain spilling onto the small wooden table, and pepper scented the air. It took her a while, but she realized that Logan hadn't come back in yet. She stood, the world tilting alarmingly for a moment. She righted herself by placing a shaky hand on the table. "Logan?" Dana called softly. The house wasn't that big. He should have heard her, but he didn't answer. She kicked off her shoes and padded down the hallway. He wasn't in their bedroom, or the bathroom, or the lounge. That just left Kelsey's room. She pushed open the partially closed door. He was sitting on the bed, Kelsey's bed, holding Emma, her favourite doll. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded. He turned, eyes swollen, tears trickling down his cheeks. "I just wanted to be close to her." "You don't belong in here." "Dana, I was just—" "Get out!" she screamed. She saw the stunned and hurt look on his face, but she couldn't seem to make herself stop. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" She began tearing at her hair and would have pulled it out had he not grabbed her hands and ripped them from her head. He grasped them tightly between his. "Calm down!" he yelled in her face. She could tell he wanted to yell some more, but he quietened himself, trying to show restraint towards his grieving wife. "Calm down," he said again, this time softly. He pulled her into his arms and hugged her. "This is all a nightmare. Tell me it's a nightmare, Logan, please," she whimpered. He kissed her on the forehead. "Oh, I wish I could. All I want in the world is to do this day over, to have Kelsey by our side where she's meant to be." He kissed her again. "I'm sorry." Dana nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Let me make you some tea," he said. "I don't want tea," she whispered, yet she allowed herself to be taken back into the kitchen. She sat on a wooden chair with a floral cushion on it. Kelsey's chair. The cushion was so the little girl could reach the table to eat with them. Something she would never do again. Logan came back with a cup of tea in his hands, which sat on the table untouched, until he finally spoke. "Do you want to go for a sleep?" he asked, blowing the steam off his cup of tea. "I don't think I can ever sleep again." "Okay." He looked away, unsure of what to say next. She didn't blame him. She didn't know either. The baby kicked, and she spilt her tea in fright. She had actually forgotten that she was pregnant for a moment. "You all right?" Logan asked. She gave him a look. "A stupid question, sorry. You spilt your tea," he pointed out uselessly. "Baby kicked," she murmured. "Could I feel it?" he asked. She wanted to tell him no, to go to hell, that they'd lost a child today and no, he couldn't touch their other one, but then she looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes red from crying, he seemed smaller somehow and she felt pity for him. "Yes," she said quietly. She turned in her chair and positioned his hand on her belly. She could see the material moving with the baby's feet as they pushed against her skin. Dana and Logan looked at each other, one child lost, one soon to be born. How were they supposed to get through this? "You look exhausted and this stress can't be good for the baby. Please go lie down. Even if you don't sleep, it's better than this sitting around, waiting for something, anything to happen." He rubbed a hand over his grief-stricken face. She tried to smile, but it didn't feel right. It felt as if she were plastering over a gaping wound that would never heal. It fell from her face even as Logan returned her smile. After hesitating, he too stopped smiling. They were just two people who had no fucking clue how to act and how to be around each other anymore. Dana began to cry. Logan looked at her before reaching out and awkwardly patting her on the shoulder, as if he was now incapable of touching her with his former ease. Lovers separated by tragedy. They should be leaning on each other, but Logan had left the room before his wife had even stopped crying. Dana heard the back door close and the shed door open. He began hammering something. She didn't know what, and right now she didn't really give a fuck. She wanted to go into Kelsey's room, to touch her things, to be alone. It was all she had of her girl now. As she walked towards Kelsey's room, she passed the framed photos that hung from the walls. Smiling family shots, close-up photos of Kelsey at all ages, professional photos from when she was a baby. Dana's whole life had been about her daughter. She loved being a mother to such a sweet little girl, so caring, so smart, so loving. She wondered if she was still a mother if she'd lost her daughter, or would she only become a mother again when the baby was born? She looked down at her swollen stomach and for a second she hated the baby within her because it wasn't Kelsey. How could she think like that? This baby was a miracle. It would save her. The baby would give her something to live for because right now she just wanted to die, to lie on a steel table linking hands with her daughter. Her heart felt hollowed out and she wondered if she was mentally and emotionally capable of being a mother again. The baby kicked. He or she was very active, had been for the past few weeks. It served as yet another reminder that it was there, that it needed to be loved, to be taken care of. The bedroom door beckoned her. Dana grasped the doorframe tightly, not sure now if she should cross the threshold. She looked around at the room. It was tidy. The bed was made and covered with a pink throw that Kelsey's nan had knitted for her. She wondered if she touched it, if she'd feel Kelsey. With a hesitant step, feeling as if she was crossing the invisible line of life and death, she entered the bedroom. Logan had thrown Emma onto the bed, not where she belonged, in the little wooden chair, ready to drink tea with her friends. How many times had Dana squashed herself into those chairs, drinking imaginary tea and talking about dolls, teddies, and playing with the beautifully crafted wooden doll's house that Pop had made her for Christmas. Kelsey had loved it. Her eyes had lit up with surprise and joy at the gift. Dana's father had even made a table for it to rest on, painting it green and adding little flowers and trees, and her mother had provided the furniture and the outfits for the little dolls that lived there. Dana made her way across the room and bent down, looking inside. Some of the furniture was crooked, so she put her hand inside to straighten it, hesitated, then pulled it back out, not wanting to disturb anything. Kelsey was the last person to touch just about everything in this room, and it needed to stay the exact same way. So Dana just stood there, looking at each treasured possession in turn, taking in each carefully selected toy, the curtains she'd made herself, fairy material, the pale pink accent wall, the throw pillows edged in lace. It was a fairy paradise, and Kelsey had loved her room, asking if she could have a pink wall when they moved again. They wouldn't be leaving here now. This was where her daughter had lived and died. All the memories of her short life were here. Dana jumped when someone touched her on the shoulder. So lost in her thoughts, she hadn't heard Logan come up behind her. He stood back, hands held up in front of him. "Sorry, I thought you heard me coming." He looked apologetic, and for a long beat she stared at him, wondering if she should slap him or not for intruding. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded, not wanting him inside her sanctuary. "I called for you, but you didn't answer, so I came looking for you," he explained. It sounded reasonable, but she wasn't in a reasonable mood. Logan turned and left the room, Dana trailing behind him. She took one last look at the room and she closed the door. She followed him back to the kitchen and went and sat down on Kelsey's chair again, making circles with her feet, trying to stretch the tight muscles in her calves. She saw Logan look at her, obviously noticing where she was sitting, but he didn't say anything. "I was thinking we should get pizza for dinner," he said quietly. She looked at him as if he had said, "Let's assassinate someone." "What?" Dana asked in shock, unsure that she'd heard him correctly. "Pizza. Obviously, you aren't able to cook and we need to eat. You need to eat. You've had a shock and you need to keep your strength up for the baby." There were so many things wrong with that sentence that she didn't know where to start. "Logan, I didn't have a shock. I lost my little girl. She died today. And I don't want to fucking eat." She yelled the last word. Wishing the salt and pepper shakers weren't already broken, she would have hurled them at the wall in anger. How can you even think of food at a time like this?